Welcome to Baby Boomer Tales. My name is Jim. This week we're doing a silver edition. It is parts of two previous episodes, both of them from 2019. The first half is from part of episode 22, Building Fence and Bucking Bales. The second is part of episode 36, The Camper Caravan. Hope you enjoy this throwback of 6 years ago. I'll be back to close this out after these two are done. If you like this episode, all I ask is that you share it. So let's get going here. See you on the other side. All the years I was growing up, my dad had me and my two brothers help him with chores around, and it seemed like one of his favorite things was to build fence. He just loved building fences and later on corrals. And the way we did it as we got a little older, when we weren't little boys, Dad was always the ramrod of the whole operation. He is the brains and we were the brawn. And he'd stake out the fence. He'd tell you where each post hole would go. And that's the first thing you have to do, is dig those holes. Well, I was raised in the Rocky Mountains, and they're not called the Rocky Mountains for nothing. It's nice topsoil all the way down, easy digging. It is basically rocks and gravel, little dirt. What we would do is we'd start the hole. We had this big, heavy iron bar. One side of it was kind of a sharp edge that went a couple inches or inch and a half. And the other end was like a spear, a sharp spear type. And so it was custom made for getting in there and breaking up rocks, wedging them free. And as we got older, the way this went was my brother John, who was stronger than an ox, would take that iron bar and bust up those rocks and dig around and make the sides of the hole nice and smooth. And my brother Don and I would take turns with the post hole digger, digging all that stuff out of the hole. Those post hole diggers are no fun. Slam it in there and kind of root it around a little and then pull the handles apart, and that would close the shovel as good as you could. Pull as much up as you could without it all dropping out, and it wanted to with all those rocks. Do that a couple times and Brother John would take over again, busting those rocks and getting it deeper and deeper. But my dad, he didn't just participate on the sidelines. His favorite thing, besides barking orders and telling us how it was done and wondering why we weren't getting the hole dug faster, he would pour water in the holes, soften up those rocks. Yeah, that was his favorite trick. Pour water. I guess it would make us feel better that he was getting those rocks all softer for us. That was quite a job. When we get the post holes dug, then we'd set posts and build the fence. He always really liked these fences with like a 1x6, 1x8 planks. And they always loved painting them white. Every fence he ever had was white. He'd love it in this day and age of those vinyl fences, except he couldn't paint it then. Those white vinyl fences, you see them up and down. Those are nice. Those aren't cheap. We did it on the cheap. And we did it with a labor force of 3 boys, a post hole digger, and a big iron bar. Whenever I have to use my post hole digger around here, and I have topsoil about 2 feet thick, but still I take my iron bar, my post hole digger, and I'll dig a hole, and I'll remember Dad. And I wish John was there. And I'd like to have Don too, take turns with that post hole digger. 3 of us plus Dad could get her done. And it was quite a time. As I got a little older, Dad decided he was going to start raising a couple cows and then take them and get them butchered in the fall. And so in the fall, we'd have to catch the cows. Now, I have no idea why he didn't train those cows to come to a little bit of oats in a bucket. But it's like they knew, and they'd always be hiding in the willows. And if you've ever tried to crawl through a bunch of willows after something, you know what I'm talking about. It was not easy. And getting those cows out of the willows was always a morning project, and it was no fun at all. But we'd get them. We'd get those cows, and then we'd have some pretty good beef. The other thing up at Dad's farm, and his farm was 8 acres. He always wanted to build a house up there, but my mom wanted to live in town. So he just had this little barn and 8 acres of hay. He'd go up there and irrigate and putz around after he sold the grocery store. He'd go up there and putz around, try having chickens or having rabbits or building a greenhouse out of used windows or something always. But in the fall, he had Floyd or somebody hay it, and it was always square bales. And then we come along and we'd load those bales into the pickup and take them to the barn, load them into the barn. Brother John loved it. I know every time I ever went there, he had already been working for a while. By the time I got there, he was always the first one there. He probably beat Dad there. But it'd take, a while to load up 8 acres of hay. Now, some of you ranch boys listen to this, you kind of laugh, but we did our best, and it was a lot of work. Later on, after we started getting wives and stuff, the wives would come too. And I remember I used to chew tobacco when I was bucking bales, and I think I was already married to my wife, but we went up there and I put in some tobacco in my mouth, and she went, "What are you doing?" Well, I'm getting ready to buck some bales. We got to get this hay up. Not with that stuff in your mouth, you're not. And that was the last time I ever put tobacco in my mouth. I guess lips that touch old Red Man will never touch hers. Afterwards, we were always paid handsomely. Dad would either take us to Silvertips or Edna's, and we'd have Mexican food. I guess that beat $3 an hour any day. It was always a fun tradition, family time where you worked your butt off. And that was Dad's way of showing how much he appreciated it. Fill us up with burritos. It was a good time. Brother John and Brother Don grew up to be big, strong men. I was always the run of the family, but I'm 6 foot tall. Those guys, you just didn't want to cross them, because they'd show me who was the boss. I had to outsmart them, and I'm not sure I did. Precious memories in my mind. I love that time with my brothers and my dad. After my sister got married, I believe her husband Alan helped us with the hay. He liked horses. I think he still does. I can only remember my mom showing up for the Mexican food, but she was probably up there. I kid about my dad pouring water in the hole, just ramrodding the operation. And a lot of that's true. He had 3 big old boys. He needed to make us work. I was blessed with 2 daughters, so I never knew the joys of having a son that I could get to dig a hole. But my dad was the hardest working man I've ever known. When I compare myself to him, I just think I'm nothing but lazy. My wife tells me I'm not, that I work hard, but that was a pretty high standard to try to live up to. Memories you make with your family will last with you forever. Hopefully they're warm memories, memories that will keep you for the rest of your days. You got to really appreciate your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, your uncles and aunts and cousins. They're all part of the fabric of your life. Things that shaped you. Things that made you what you are today. I'm richer for it, and I'll treasure those times in my heart forever. Growing up in the mountains, every fall there would be an event that I always look forward to, watching them drive through town, and we called it the camper caravan. And all of these pickup trucks that had a camper shell, and this camper shell had steps up into it, a door, windows, a kitchenette. Over the pickup cab there's a sleeping space, so there's a bed there. They're really very nice. They're kind of like a camp trailer, only they sat in the back of your pickup truck. In this caravan, I don't believe we saw people pulling trailers or motorhomes driving down the road. I think it was all these pickup trucks with their campers in them, and there were a lot of them. I want to say hundreds. It seemed like hundreds. They went through town, and it took quite a while, one ride after the other, after the other, after the other, driving through town on their way up to the resort town where the lake is. They would do it every fall. When I was little, I'd jump up and down and probably hold my dad's hand and point and wave, get all excited, and they'd maybe honk and wave back. But as I got older, I must have been 15 years old, I came up with a brilliant idea. So I got my buddies Wayne and Dan together, and I said, let's go up to the lake, to the camper caravan, and meet some girls. That sounded like a perfect thing. Those Denver girls were different, and I thought it was a great idea. Since we were 15, we had to find a ride, and somehow we found a ride. And we got up to the town, and I remember it was already dark, and it was cold. It was the fall, so it was cold up there. You start getting frost very early, like Labor Day, and so the nights turn cold early in the season. And went to a couple of the bars and restaurants where there seemed to be a lot of action, campers all up and down the street. And the one thing that my plan didn't take into consideration, and I don't know why, but a lot of my plans were just half-baked in the first place. I'd make a plan and act on it, then I'd get in the middle of the plan and wonder what in the heck is going on. This was one of those times. Everywhere we went, no girls, just these old folks and their wives, and everyone was laughing and having fun. And you know, when you're 15, you don't have to be very old to be considered old in a 15-year-old's eyes. So I don't know how old all these people were, but I do not remember seeing any girls my age. We looked for a while, and then with a huge feeling of dejection. There was no rejection because there weren't any girls there to reject us, but we were dejected, and we reluctantly decided to head for home. There was another flaw in my plan. We didn't have a ride home. How are we going to get home? Well, that's easy. We're going to hitchhike. I don't know if I said it or if Dan said it. Dan was my hitchhiking buddy so often. I have spoken about Dan before. We took a little trip to Gallup, New Mexico once. We used to hitchhike around locally, so it was no big deal. No big deal, Wayne. We're hitchhiking. Wayne was not that way. He wasn't wired that way, but he agreed. What was he going to do? Call us folks? So we walked to the end of town and stuck out our thumb with all the assurance that we would catch a ride just like that. Well, just like that turned into a half an hour and no rides. If there were cars on the road, they were coming into town and not leaving town. And if a camper passed us, they were just going to wherever they were camping, so they weren't picking us up. So we started to walk. And we walked out of town onto the highway. And there's even less traffic. Tourist season was over. Winter was knocking on our door, and it was cold outside. You could probably see 1 billion stars. And when it's clear, it gets very cold. Well, we started walking and walking and walking. It's 16 miles from that lake town to my hometown. And 16 miles might not sound like very long to a marathon runner. But to 3 15-year-old boys in the middle of the night, in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of the fall, it could have been 1,600 miles. And we walked, and we struggled, and we walked, and we walked. After what seemed like forever, we could hear music in the background. It was up there somewhere, somewhere. And the more we walked, the louder the music became. Finally, we stumbled into this place, and they were working there and laughing, and there was a jukebox playing. And you could tell the place was under construction, and somebody greeted us and explained to us they were building a new bar and restaurant. It was going to be called Silvertips. We got warm there. They were very, very nice, but they weren't going anywhere. They were working. And so we probably hung out there for 20 minutes or so, kind of warmed up a little. You want to remember, we weren't wearing down parkas or anything. We were being cool. We were looking for girls. We had leather jackets on, probably jeans and tennis shoes, no hat, no gloves. And off we went again, trudging along, complaining all the way, blaming each other for whose big idea was this. And walking, and blaming, and walking, and complaining. Well, I think we must have walked 7 or 8 miles. And along comes a car, and he stopped. And it was Chuck. Chuck I used to call Herbert. I believe that's right, Chuck, isn't it, Herbert? And he took us into town. I was never so happy to see a guy in my life. Now, we went to school with Chuck. Knew him very well. I believe he had a girlfriend in my hometown, and he lived up in the lake town, or we'd probably still be walking today. There'd be a statue of 3 guys frozen stiff on the side of the road. And here are 3 silly boys thinking they could walk in the middle of October. We wouldn't even have to be bronzed. Now today, I don't know if you would see many campers. They're few and far between. But back there in the 60s, early 70s, that was almost a preferred mode of going up into the mountains to camp, was those campers on a pickup truck. Today, there's big, expensive motorhomes, fifth-wheel trailers that are very, very luxurious and nice. We have some friends that have one, and it is a nice thing. Camp trailers, these motorhomes that look like buses. But the campers, like what you saw on the camper Caravan every fall, are almost a dinosaur. I can't remember the last time I saw one. That was a wonderful time, the fall there. The aspen trees all turn gold. They call it quakies, so you can hear them kind of rattle in the wind. And the mountains just turn into mountains of gold from those quaking aspens in the fall. And they turn long before the trees in the Midwest, or the trees in New England, or the trees in the Smoky Mountains. The leaves fall to the ground and prepare themselves for winter. It's a beautiful place that you really can't tell in the middle of the night, walking along the highway, complaining all the way. Sometimes I miss stuff like that. Now don't get me wrong, I don't want to be stuck out in the middle of a highway with it being 20 degrees out or whatever, with no heavy coat on and no hopes for a ride anywhere. But wherever you're at, whatever's going on, if you find yourself in trouble, if you find yourself forlorn, if you find yourself where it seems like you don't have a friend in the world, there's always a Herbert out there to come and rescue you. I don't care who you are or how alone you are. Herbert's there. I pray you recognize that when Herbert shows up. It's going to get better. It'll always get better. Situations we find ourselves in so often are just temporary. Even if they last quite a while, they are temporary. Don't let it get you down. Get on top of it. Stay on top of it with a good attitude, with a positive outlook, with a never give up spirit about you. And good old Herbert will come. Well, that'll do it for this week. Thank you for riding along. Always be kind. You be glad with yourself when you are. See you next Wednesday. Peace out.